Okay, so if anyone joins today, it might just be me and Craig. We'll see what happens here. So I'm going to start with Sutta 30 today, because I do believe that I've read the last section, and if not, I think I'll just let you read the rest of it for yourself if you're following along. Because there's just, yeah, I think I might have left off in the middle of a sutra, but anyway, let's pick it up from here. In search of what might be skillful, seeking the unexcelled state of sublime peace, I wandered by stages in the Magadhan country and came to the military town of Uruvaya. And again, my apologies if I'm not doing well with pronunciation. I'm sorry about that. There I saw some delightful countryside with an inspiring forest grove, a clear flowing river with fine, delightful banks, and villages for alms going on all sides. The thought occurred to me, how delightful is this countryside, with its inspiring forest grove, clear flowing river with fine, delightful banks, and villages for almsgoing on all sides. This is just right for the striving of a clansman intent on striving. So I sat down right there thinking, this is just right for striving. Then these three similes, spontaneous, never before heard, appeared to me. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of timber lying in the water, and a man were to come along with an upper fire stick thinking, I'll produce fire. I'll make heat appear. Now what do you think? Would he be able to produce fire and make heat appear by rubbing the upper fire stick in the wet, sappy timber lying in the water? No, Master Gautama. Why is that? Because the timber is wet and sappy, and besides it is lying in the water. Eventually, the man would reap only his share of weariness and disappointment. So it is with any contemplative or Brahmin who does not live withdrawn from sensuality in body and mind, and whose desire, infatuation, urge, thirst, and fever for sensuality is not relinquished and stilled within him. Whether or not he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings due to his striving or awakening, he is incapable of knowledge, vision, and unexcelled self-awakening. This was the first simile, spontaneous, never before heard, that appeared to me. So I think I mentioned this in, if not the last episode, the episode before that, and we're already kind of starting to get into what the Buddha thought about our relationship to our sensuality. And, here I find it interesting that he's, because of his attention to the five aggregates and, and how he speaks about them, painful, racking, piercing. I mean, this is thirst, fever. So all of these sensual pleasures really can be very, very enticing. Very, very enticing. And because they kick it all up, right? That sensuality, the passions, desire, right? Infatuation, urge, fever. I love these words here. It can easily lead to unskillfulness. And here he's putting right next to it this idea of striving for awakening, right? Which I know we've talked about, in previous episodes as well, So he's mentioned this again and again, that if we're looking for something, right, in following the Eightfold Path, in doing the action steps of the Eightfold Path, right, the practice, right concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, right, all of it. Well, we need to be mindful, right, to not get caught up in that need to get somewhere, to get something. Then a second simile, spontaneous, never before heard, appeared to me. Suppose there was a wet, sappy piece of timber lying on land far from water, and a man were to come along with an upper fire stick thinking, I'll produce fire. I'll make heat appear. Now what do you think? Would he be able to produce fire and make heat appear by rubbing the upper fire stick in the wet, sappy timber lying on land far from water? No, Master Gotama. Why is that? Because the timber is wet and sappy, even though it is lying on land far from water. Eventually the man would reap only his share of weariness and disappointment. So it is with any contemplative or Brahmin who lives withdrawn from sensuality in body only, but whose desire, infatuation, urge, thirst, and fever for sensuality is not relinquished and stilled within him. Whether or not he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings due to his striving, he is incapable of knowledge, vision, and unexcelled self-awakening. This was the second simile, spontaneous, never before heard, that appeared to me. Yeah. This almost savors to me again of that idea of momentum, or perhaps, once I'm done with this book and I can get into Hinduism more and kind of see, the culture in which Siddhartha grew up in. But the way that he's using these parables, or this idea that, I'm going to go back here a little bit, but he's talking about, in the first story, the sappy stick is lying in the water, and obviously you're not going to be able to make a fire, right? You're in it, you're in the sensuality of body and mind, right? You're in it, and you're in those passions which can tip off momentum of fabricated state, right? It can kind of be the tip off. And so then in the second, right, the stick is on land but near the water. Look at that again. Yeah. It's okay, so there's a sappy piece of timber lying on land far from the water. So interesting. Okay, got it. So it might be on the land now. And he's using the word simile here. So the man represents the practice, I suspect. The man represents well, not the practice. The man represents the fire of the mind, the fabricated state, the binding, our attachment to everything that's kicking up and creating reality for us. So in the second simile, I have to assume that what he's saying is taking that stick out of the water and moving it over to the land. It's still wet, it needs to go deeper. And again, that's how I'm taking this. What I'm taking this to mean is that it needs to go beyond that. It needs to go deeper than that. And that makes a lot of sense. I think that this is something that probably comes up, and I've certainly heard this idea a lot in relationship to addiction recovery. Particularly when you get into, perhaps really serious addictions, like people who are seriously addicted to alcohol, right? To the point where it's really starting to, their life is deteriorating, right? And they know it. Or maybe someone who's, struggling with a really serious drug, right? Trying to use willpower or white knuckling through sobriety. And I know that I have absolutely tried that. Not to say that it doesn't work for people, we're not all the same, but I'm using this analogy because I know that that doesn't work for me. And I almost feel like this is an analogy because I think that this idea of dropping even below that, even below the sensuality of the body, right? But kind of sensuality in general, right? Just this desire, this strong urge to have, get somewhere else is, I think that's the thing that can drive a lot of addictions, and that's really what I think Buddhism is getting at again with this idea of life is suffering. It's, some of the suffering is inherently a natural byproduct of breathing in and out and being a Homo sapien. We're probably gonna get sick, and maybe we won't get sick, but we're definitely gonna die. I don't think that the tech bros have figured that out yet, right? So, as far as no, we're still gonna die. And then of course there's the other kinds of suffering, right? There's the suffering that comes out of these stories here, right? That if we don't go deep enough, then if we don't surrender, right? If we don't relax into if we can't do it, right, then we're incapable of knowledge, vision, and unexcelled self-awakening. Okay, so here's the last one. Then a third simile, spontaneous, never before heard, appeared to me. Suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of timber lying on land, far from water, and a man were to come along with an upper fire stick, thinking, I'll produce fire. I'll make heat appear. Now what do you think? Would he be able to produce fire and make heat appear by rubbing the upper fire stick in the dry, sapless timber lying on land? Yes, Master Gautama. Why is that? Because the timber is dry and sapless, and besides, it is lying on land, far from water. So it is with any contemplative or Brahmin who lives withdrawn from sensuality in body and mind, and whose desire, infatuation, urge, thirst, and fever for sensuality is relinquished and stilled within him. Whether or not he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings due to his striving, he is capable of knowledge, vision, and unexcelled self-awakening. This was the third simile, spontaneous, never before heard, that appeared to me. I thought, what if I, clenching my teeth and pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, were to beat down, constrain, and crush my mind with my awareness? So just kind of sort of talking about this, right? White knuckling it, I will do it, of my own self-will, right? By my own mind, the same mind that got me here, I will do it. So clenching my teeth and pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrained, and crushed my mind with my awareness. Just as a strong man seizing a weaker man by the head or the throat or the shoulders would beat him down, constrain, and crush him. As I did so, sweat poured from my armpits, and although tireless persistence was aroused in me, and unmuddled mindfulness established, my body was aroused and uncalm because of the painful exertion. But the painful feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. I thought, what if I were to become absorbed in the trance of non-breathing? So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my nose and mouth. As I did so, there was a loud roaring of winds coming out my ear holes, just like the loud roar of winds coming out of a smith's bellows. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my nose and mouth and ears. As I did so, extreme forces sliced through my head, just as if a strong man were slicing my head open with a sharp sword. Extreme pains arose in my head, just as if a strong man were tightening a turban made of tough leather straps around my head. Extreme forces carved up my stomach cavity, just as if a butcher or his apprentice were to carve up the stomach cavity of an ox. There was an extreme burning in my body, just as if two strong men, grabbing a weaker man by the arms, were to roast and broil him over a pit of hot embers. Oh, man! This is gnarly, but you know what? I think that this is just absolutely ideal. The word choices, burning, roasting, broiling. It can absolutely feel like this. If you sit long enough and you just stay, it absolutely can feel like this. And although tireless persistence was aroused in me and unmuddled mindfulness established, my body was aroused and uncalm because of the painful exertion. But the painful feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. Devas, on seeing me, said, "Gautama, the contemplative is dead." Other devas said, "He isn't dead, he's dying." Others said, "He's neither dead nor dying. He's an arahant, for this is the way arahants live." I thought, what if I were to practice going altogether without food? Then devas came to me and said, "Dear sir, please don't practice going altogether without food. If you go altogether without food, we'll infuse divine nourishment in through your pores, and you will survive on that." I thought, if I were to claim to be completely fasting while these devas are infusing divine nourishment in through my pores, I would be lying. So I dismissed them, saying, "Enough." I thought, what if I were to take only a little food at a time, only a handful at a time of bean soup, lentil soup, veg soup, or pea soup? So I took only a little food at a time, only a handful at a time of bean soup, lentil soup, veg soup, or pea soup. My body became extremely emaciated. Simply from my eating so little, my limbs became like the jointed segments of vine stems or bamboo stems. My backside became like a camel's hoof. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old run-down barn. The gleam of my eyes appeared to be sunk deep in my eye sockets, like the gleam of water deep in a well. My scalp shriveled and withered like a green, bitter gourd, shriveled and withered in the heat and the wind. The skin of my belly became so stuck to my spine that when I thought of touching my belly, I grabbed hold of my spine as well. And when I thought of touching my spine, I grabbed hold of the skin of my belly as well. If I urinated or defecated, I fell over on my face right there, simply from my eating so little. If I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair, rotted at its roots, fell from my body as I rubbed, simply from eating so little. People on seeing me would say, "Gautama, Gautama the contemplative is black." Other people would say, "Gautama the contemplative isn't black, he's brown." Others would say, "Gautama the contemplative is neither black nor brown, he's golden-skinned." So much had the clear, bright color of my skin deteriorated, simply from eating so little. I thought, whatever contemplatives or Brahmins in the past have felt painful, racking, piercing feelings due to their striving, this is the utmost. None have been greater than this. Whatever contemplatives or Brahmins in the future will feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to their striving, this is the utmost. None will be greater than this. Whatever contemplatives or Brahmins in the present are feeling painful, racking, piercing feelings due to their striving, nah. This, okay, I added the nah. I retract that. This is the utmost. None is greater than this. But with this racking practice of austerities, I haven't attained any superior human state, any distinction in knowledge or vision worthy of the noble ones. Could there be another path to awakening? Oh, wow. So, hearkening back from last week, if going back in the book a little bit to see that the subtitle of this is Discovering the Path. And of course, and in Buddhism, right, the path is also can be, you'll hear people describing the Four Noble Truths, the last of which is the plan of action, the Eightfold Path, as the middle way, right? So here I think we're really hearing how I have absolutely seen this, experienced this myself, have heard it and seen it in others who are learning to meditate. That there can't, especially if you're coming at it from a place of desperation, right? So what do I mean by desperation? This topic comes up frequently in this podcast, is desperation, like, again, going back to addiction, right? Maybe you're recovering from addiction. Maybe you've bottomed out with the addiction and you just can't see going on, right? And so you experience some kind of a shift. Maybe you find your way into Buddhism through that way. Or maybe you're just so unhappy. You're just so miserable. Your life feels so pointless, so absolutely meaningless to you, that something within you, again, this idea of breaking or hitting a bottom, right? Something within you elicits the change, the pivot from Act 1 to Act 2, from Act 2 to Act 3, right? That shift. That instigates the hero's journey, right? That kind of initializes it, kicks it off. Yeah, there is that sense initially, that I just, the striving, the trying, right? And, he says here, yeah, I basically what happened was that I got super, super weak and people didn't even recognize me. I was so weak and so, unrecognizable and so great. Yeah, that striving, did a lot for cultivating, a lot of very positive attributions that can assist with, choosing to follow this path to the best of one's ability, right? Kind of like the intention. But in the end, right? Yeah, he didn't have some, right? The sky didn't part, the clouds didn't part. And so there you go. So continuing on, I recall once when my father, the Sakyan, was working, and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, then, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful dhammas, I entered and remained in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Could that be the path to awakening? Then there was the consciousness following on that memory. I'm going to try my best here because I want to do my best. Satan Usari Vinana. I hope I did somewhat okay. That is the path to awakening. I thought, so why am I afraid of that pleasure that has nothing to do with sensuality? Nothing to do with unskillful dhammas? I thought, I am no longer afraid of that pleasure that has nothing to do with sensuality, nothing to do with unskillful dhammas. But that pleasure is not easy to achieve with a body so extremely emaciated. Suppose I were to take some solid food, some rice and porridge. So I took some solid food, some rice and porridge. Now 5 monks had been attending on me, thinking, if Gautama, our contemplative, achieves some higher state, he will tell us. But when they saw me taking some solid food, some rice and porridge, they were disgusted and left me, thinking, Gautama the contemplative is living luxuriously. He has abandoned his exertion and is backsliding into abundance. So when I had taken solid food and regained strength, then, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful dhammas, I entered and remained in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. With the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, I entered and remained in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of concentration, unification of awareness free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. With the fading of rapture, I remained in equanimity, mindful and alert, and sensed pleasure with the body. I entered and remained in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, Equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of joy and distress, I entered and remained in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of recollecting my past lives. I recollected my manifold past lives. One birth, 2, 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000. Many eons of cosmic contraction. Many eons of cosmic expansion. Many eons of cosmic contraction and expansion. There I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance. Such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose there. There too I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance. Such was my food, such was my experience of pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose here. Thus I remembered my manifold past lives and their modes and details. This was the first knowledge I attained in the first watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed. Knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed. Light arose. As happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. Well, I'll just kind of come in here to briefly speak that I've had a few things happen in my life that I can't really explain. One was a hypnosis session that kind of, introduced me to the 12 steps, and had some experiences that make me open to the idea of past lives. I'll just say that I'm open, very open to this idea. I think that one can find for themselves just through direct experiences. He often repeats here that if you push it to the degree that which on the precipice for him, right between Siddhartha and Buddha, he really stretched his body to the limits. But wow, it is amazing to see what's possible, and to have a glimpse is well, quite frankly, it's quite affirming. It's quite reassuring. It's quite uplifting, I think. Okay, so where did I leave off? When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. I saw by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, beings passing away and reappearing, and I discerned how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. These beings who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech, and mind, who reviled the noble ones, held wrong views, and undertook actions under the influence of wrong views, with the breakup of the body after death, have reappeared in a plane of deprivation, a bad destination, a lower realm, hell. But these beings, who were endowed with good conduct of body, speech, and mind, who did not revile the noble ones, who held right views and undertook actions under the influence of right views, with the breakup of the body after death, have reappeared in a good destinations, a heavenly world, thus by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human. I saw beings passing away and reappearing, and I discerned how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. This was the second knowledge I attained in the second watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness was destroyed, light arose, as happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. And all I can really compare this to for myself is I remember when I went to this hypnotherapist, and yeah, if anybody is listening to this who, as skeptics may wholly just think all of this is a crock, and right on, I myself don't understand what I experienced. But in that hypnosis, I experienced an incredibly vivid experiences in which I was very much in first person, and I was a little boy, and it was the 1800s, and there was a woman, just a woman, maybe like, I don't know, 18, in Asia. I was definitely some kind of a culture. It's on a boat. There were lanterns, and then I was, in the dream, hypnosis therapy session. I was maybe 13, 14, and it was definitely medieval period, and I was starving. I was starving to death. It was very vivid, this hypnotherapy session. I really could feel the incredible hunger, just the most gnawing hunger. I've never felt anything like it. So I can't really explain that, you know. Was that past lives, right? My own skepticism, my own all of that, right? According to many ancient wisdom traditions, would provide the momentum necessary for these feelings to not remain in my body or invade it. I hope that makes sense. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the ending of affluence. I discerned, as it had come to be, that this is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. This is the way leading to the cessation of stress. These are affluence. This is the origination of affluence. This is the cessation of affluence. This is the way leading to the cessation of affluence. My heart, thus knowing, thus seeing, was released from the affluent of sensuality, released from the affluent of becoming, released from the affluent of ignorance. Oh, with release, there was the knowledge, released. I discerned that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world. This was the third knowledge. I attained in the third watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness was destroyed, light arose, as happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. Wow, and I don't know that I quite understand what is meant by repeating it here in this last stanza, I guess, if you will. And if it means what I believe it means, and I really do hope that this is what it means, I really do. I really hope that this is what he means. As that even after he's had his, quote unquote, awakening, the awakened one, right? Climbing the jhana ladder, confronting his own non-self, face to non-face, right? All of this. He still says at the end of this sutta, right? Right? I mean, this is the end of it, right? M in 36. But the pleasant feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. And again, this is what I think I appreciate so much about Buddhism, is that, again, it's this idea of just non-attachment, that kind of undertook this very arduous, in many respects, endeavor. And arduous even when he was kind of undergoing just all of the wonderful kind of, sensual pleasures of being alive, that he never quite lost his head. There was always this kind of n=1 sense about Siddhartha as he walked this path, and to my mind, that's what is meant here. And I think I like that because in considering it that way or thinking about it in that way, you can't help it in making that assumption about all of this, then you never really lose sight of this sense of beginner's mind. This sense that there is no end to get to, there is no heaven to arrive at, there is no pearly gates that marks the end of the road. And that's how I'm taking this, but again, this is really, quite frankly, what I want it to mean. So again, I welcome any scholar to set me straight. Okay, I think I'm going to get into some of these supplementary factors because I still have about 15 minutes. So these are the supplementary factors associated with, developing or beginning this path here. Sutta 31 says, "Let an observant person come, one who is not fraudulent, not deceitful, one of a straightforward nature. I instruct him. I teach him the Dhamma. Practicing as instructed, he in no long time knows for himself, sees for himself." So this is how there is the right liberation from bondage, i.e. the bondage of ignorance. MN 80, see also Sutta 45. Wow, gotta love the simplicity of this, right? He's so practical. It's very, very pragmatic, right? And again, this goes back to that road to Radhaga that I love so much. It's like, yeah, I look for students who aren't full of BS, right? They're not caught up in their ego and via their own egoic clinging, they're just looking to, maybe be a guru or to prop themselves up, right? By exerting power, right? Maybe they're deceitful even to themselves, right? Going back and looking at, past chapters about how the idea of discernment and how the Buddha was very discerning about who he would teach. And again, this goes back to what he said as well, straightforward, right? No BS. Just look, this is what needs to be done. This is what's going on. This is what I see within myself, right? There's no, again, all of these kind of point to this willingness to drop the egoic clinging for a moment and just drop away from everything that we think we know about who we think we are. And that if the student is willing and ready to do that, then they'll know for themselves. There's nothing to read at that point. You practice and you'll know through subjective personal experience. And quite frankly, that's really, the only way for someone to really know, right? They really do. I mean, I think parents probably know this to be true as their kids get older, right? Because, you could say all day long, son, daughter, don't do that. I remember when I was your age, I did that, and oh man, I got grounded, or oh, I got my heart broken, or oh, I got expelled from school. And the kids don't really listen, right? Because that's just not how it works. It's just not how humans learn anything. right? So think, to my mind, that's what Sutta 31 is getting at here. Sutta 32, monks. There are these two conditions for the arising of wrong view. Which two? The voice of another and inappropriate attention. These are the two conditions for the arising of wrong view. Monks. There are these two conditions for the arising of a right view. Which two? The voice of another and appropriate attention. These are the two conditions for the arising of right view. And again, you can also see this in AN 2 colon 123 and 124. So we talked about this before, right? Bhikkhu talks about this in earlier sections of the book, that this idea of an admirable friend, an admirable friendship, and why that's such an important supplementary factor, external factor to the Eightfold Path, because it's important, right? It's really, really important that that friend be admirable, because as will continue to be discussed and has already been established, we are the byproducts of the fabricated state, the five aggregates of form. And so the people, the voices that are in our environment, that are in our ear and in our spaces and places, they influence us. We may not even be aware of it. We may not even be cognizant, right? You may have machinations operating in your own mental framework right now that are not serving you, that got there because of early influences in your own life. So here he's reminding us, just as the right voice and right concentration, right? Or, right, appropriate attention, right? Can help us on the path. The wrong kind of influence and the wrong kind, right, or inappropriate attention is going to lead us off the path. And right, so this is, we've definitely talked about this before, right? Sutta 33. Monks. When right view is supported by 5 factors, it has awareness release as its fruit. Awareness release as its reward has discernment release as its fruit. Discernment release as its reward. Which 5? There is the case where right view is supported by virtue, supported by learning, supported by discussion, supported by tranquility, supported by insight. When supported by these 5 factors, right view has awareness release as its fruit, awareness release as its reward, has discernment release as its fruit, and discernment release as its reward. And that's a really very optimistic and exciting promise that the Buddha is making here. So going back to the beginning of this sutta here, we've talked before about how Buddhism is very, very, very much grounded in ethics, right view, right speech, right livelihood, and cultivating virtue, virtuous qualities, which I know will be got out throughout and later. And this is supported by the Dhamma, right, by the teachings and the learning, and supported by the Sangha and the discussions, and asking questions of the guide, and asking questions of each other, or taking the suttas as I am here and discussing them with myself, or if anybody ever joins me, discussing them with them, is part of this idea of right view and how it can be supported. Supported by tranquility, right? So even though I'm far from awake and far from perfect and struggle with, my fabricated state, can be quick to, I can sometimes be quick to anger, not like, crazy anger, but just quick to become terse or sharp. If I perceive that I am being dismissed, or, so again, I'm far from perfect, right? But I can practice meditating every day and doing other practices that Buddhists do to cultivate tranquility and to cultivate insight right? That can support this idea. Okay. So I really only have a few more minutes left, and so I think that this is actually a really good place to stop here, right before we begin with Sutta 34. But I enjoyed that very much. But if you're listening, thanks for listening. You're always welcome. And take care of yourself. Be well. Bye.